Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today I will be covering my pick for the best Ranger build in Baldur's Gate 3. This is going to be a part of my Simple Builds series, so we're going to be focusing on maximizing the strengths of Ranger as well as taking at least the majority of our levels in the Ranger class. This is pretty interesting for Ranger as a class because in a lot of build guides you'll see people taking only 3 or maybe 5 levels of Ranger and then exiting, but I think there's actually a lot that Ranger has to offer at later levels that we can really maximize in this build. This build will be an excellent damage-dealing character, as well as being a ranged stealth character, making it one of the best characters to solo Tactician mode with if that's something that you're interested in doing. I'm using Minsc as the example character here because he's the ranger that Larian has given us, but of course, if you are looking for a build that is more in line with his particular history, then you should check out my lore-friendly Minsc guide, which focuses on making him a two-handed weapon attacker. This build, of course, is also, in my opinion, an excellent build for main characters, whether in a party or solo, and will serve you extremely well as a damage-dealing ranged attacker throughout the game. Before we begin, I'd also like to take a moment to thank Jonalov Holt for the second 25 Norwegian kroner donation, as well as Hath Ulreg for the 50 Swedish krona, so a little bit of a Scandinavian national rivalry going on there. If you're from Denmark, I'm afraid you're on the back foot, but seriously, thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate it. Alright, let's get right into the build. If you're building this for a main character, the first thing that you're going to want to do is probably pick a different race. Human is not by any means a bad racial option for your ranger and is good for everything, but we can do a little better. In particular, there's a couple that have strong synergy with what Ranger is trying to do. One of these is Deep Gnome, because one of the advantages of Ranger is that you get to act from stealth. Deep Gnomes get advantage on stealth checks, as well as Rangers with the subclass we're going, get incredibly strong saving throws, and gnomes get racial advantage on all of their mental saving throws, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, meaning that you will pass pretty much every save that the game throws at you if you go a deep gnome. Another option, of course, is Wood Elf, which is always an incredible option, or half Wood Elf, made even more powerful because this build is a ranged attacker, so the additional mobility as well as perception proficiencies are very strong on your character. Githyanki is always a good choice as well, and then after that there are many others that are great options, but those are the three with special synergy, I believe, because of the mobility or because of the stealth proficiencies. Also worth mentioning is Lightfoot Halfling for stealth proficiency and the ability to reroll ones. Very useful, especially I think if you're solo, just because natural ones are the real enemy of solo characters. Alright, let's get right into building our character here. So the first thing that we have to do is fix these stats, because the Ranger's default stats are terrible. One thing that Rangers have as an issue with the character is that they are multi-attribute dependent or mad. That means there are at least 3 stats that they want to get. And as I always say, it's bad to be mad, and it's rad to be sad, single attribute dependent. We're going to try to reduce our dependency on other attributes as much as possible while still increasing the 3 that we need. One thing that mitigates the downsides of this for Ranger is that the 3 stats they need, Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom, are also the 3 most important saving throws in the game. Every saving throw, there are 3 important saving throws: Dex, Con, and Wisdom, which many effects, especially the most severe effects, target, and 3 less important saving throws: Strength, Intelligence, and Charisma. So typically it's safe to reduce your Strength, Int, and Charisma as much as possible, as long as you don't give up too many points in Dex, Con, and Wisdom. Since we're a Dexterity-based build, we're going to increase our Dexterity as much as possible, and we cast with Wisdom, so we need that, and then every character needs Constitution in order to maximize your hit points. For this reason, I'm going to suggest the somewhat unconventional stat spread of 17, 16, and 15 in Dex, Con, and Wisdom, and then we will increase these with our first ASI to hit our odd numbers. If you don't like this stat spread, and I understand there's a lot of people who do not like having 3 -8s, you can certainly reduce your Wisdom down to 14, your Dex to 16, and then you get 4 points to bring up, say, Strength, or just 2 in each of these, and that will be also fine. Similarly, if you are intending to use Anti-Ethel's deal to increase your dex by 1, then you need the 17, but you don't want the odd number in wisdom in that case. But this, I think, is going to be your best stat spread for most characters. For our skills, the most important thing is that we have access to stealth, because that's going to be critically important for this build. You'll want to start just about every combat in stealth because it gives you advantage on your attacks. Rangers also will benefit from having all of the dexterity-based skills, so if you get access to sleight of hand, that can be good, which if you are a human, you can get proficiency in that. And then any wisdom-based skills that you can pick up are also a reasonable pick for you. Obviously, if this isn't your main character, you won't necessarily need the dialogue skills like insight, but that's still reasonably useful to have. The only really important one is stealth. Another thing to point out is that you do have the option to take Urban Tracker and gain sleight of hand proficiency. So if you aren't a human, and especially if you're a solo character, you may want to spend your natural explorer pick getting sleight of hand proficiency. But this stat split will be good because you get stealth, you get sleight of hand, and those are both important skills for your character as well as important for your party to have. For our favored enemy selection, these really provide extremely minor effects. They give you proficiency in primarily skills that you will have no bonuses in, so they're knowledge skills, and spells that are basically not useful. True Strike is completely redundant for this build because you will start in stealth all the time, so you'll always have advantage, as well as being a weak spell overall. Armor proficiency in heavy armor is strong, but because we're a dexterity-based build and there are medium armors that let you use your full dexterity, you will end up with better AC in medium armor than you would in heavy armor. So Ranger Knight is less useful overall than it would be for the melee version of this build, for example. And then all of the ones that let you cast cantrips are not terribly useful. So the best one overall is going to be Bounty Hunter, giving enemies disadvantage on saves against Ensnaring Strike. The saves won't be super hard to make anyways, because it's based on your Wisdom save DC, which won't be very high, even with this stat split that emphasizes Wisdom, but giving enemies disadvantage against this effect, and it's a very powerful effect. Ensnare is a very dangerous effect for enemies, so making them fail that more often is very useful. For our Natural Explorer pick, like I mentioned, if you're solo, you might want to take Urban Tracker, but otherwise you should take Wasteland Wanderer Fire. Resistance to fire damage will come up all the time in this game. It's the most common damage type, and it's extremely valuable to have in terms of keeping you alive. Alright. Let's go to level 2. At level 2, we get one of the best things that Rangers get access to, and that is a fighting style. The reason this is so powerful is because for Archer characters, you get the Archery fighting style, giving you a +2 bonus to ranged attacks. This means that your bow attacks are going to hit way more often than any other attack made by any other character in the game. 10% more often, in fact, because a +2 bonus damage increases the percentage chance of hitting by 10% per roll. So overall, you're going to have more success landing attacks than any other character with your maxed out dexterity and the archery fighting style. This makes you an incredibly reliable damage dealer, and will combo very well with the additional damaging effects that we get later on. We also get 2 spells. Because we took Bounty Hunter, we'll probably want to take Ensnaring Strike, although later on we may want to just sub out of this anyways. And you'll likely want, at low levels, Hunter's Mark, because the extra 1d6 damage per attack against certain enemies will come up and be pretty useful. Some other options to take are Longstrider, which is a ritual spell, meaning it doesn't cost you a spell slot to cast, and increases your movement speed by 10 feet. I talked a little bit about how important movement speed is for this character, because you can keep out of melee range of enemies. Longstrider helps you do that. And Fog Cloud, because you can use it to become immune to ranged attackers. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. At Ranger level 3, we pick our subclass. And the subclass that I'm going to pick is going to be the Gloomstalker. Gloomstalker gets a few enormous advantages that make it the best ranged attacker in the game, and has one of the better class features in the game available at level 3. That class feature is Dread Ambusher. This gives you about 8 different things, all of which are incredible. So on the first turn of combat, your movement speed increases by 10 feet. By itself, already a reasonable class feature, and this is the smallest of the 3 things this gives you. It also gives you +3 to initiative, and initiative is ridiculously important in this game. +3 is also an enormous bonus, because in Baldur's Gate 3, initiative is rolled on a d4, so a +3 bonus is more than doubling your average roll on your initiative bonus. It also combos very well with the fact that you are a dexterity character, meaning you'll almost always go first in combat. Going first in combat lets you do a lot of things. If you're a ranged character, of course, you can take out an enemy before they can act at all, and this character being a ranged damage dealer can typically knock one priority enemy out of the fight immediately before you can go. If your whole party wins initiative as well, you get to choose the order in which your characters act, meaning that if you have a party member supporting this character, say by casting haste on you, you can choose for them to cast haste before this character takes their turn. So it's extremely valuable for every character in your party to have as high initiative as possible. Gloomstalker gets that. The third thing is that you get, it's kind of buried at the end of this somewhat poorly written tooltip, you can make an attack that deals an additional 1d8 damage. What this doesn't tell you is that that's an extra attack on your first round of combat, meaning that where every other character is making 2 attacks, or making 1 attack, you're making 2. Only one other character in the game gets access to a second attack at level 3, and that's the Berserker Barbarian, and you just get this with no penalties. Unlike them, you have no penalties, don't need to be raging or anything, and in fact get a bonus 1d8 damage on this attack. This means that starting at level 3, you have the highest first turn damage output of any character in the game. Being able to take out enemies this early is incredibly strong. You also get 80 feet of dark vision, which is very useful as well. Just in general as a stealth character. It doesn't come up that often in the arenas in Baldur's Gate, but when it does, you'll be very grateful that you have it. And, importantly, you get a bonus action, stealth. You can hide as a bonus action. This means that you will never need to be out of stealth on basically any turn of combat, because Rangers otherwise don't have great uses for their bonus actions. But if you hide, then you have advantage on your next attack, meaning that you are both making more attacks and are more likely to hit your attacks than just about every other character in the game. Umbral Shroud lets you become invisible, but it is somewhat redundant with just being able to hide. Becoming invisible is not incredibly useful for a lot of characters. I mean, this will come up, especially in areas where you can't easily hide, but for the most part, you are going to not want to spend an action on this in combat. It's a pre-combat thing. So you'll typically just want to use hide instead, because it has effectively the same effect. For our spell selection, we'll take whichever one we didn't take earlier. I'm going to take Fog Cloud here, and then I might at this level consider replacing one of these two, whichever one you're using less often. Like if you find you're not using Ensnaring Strike, you can replace it with Long Strider if you don't have that on another party member, or don't have access to it already. Ranger level 4, we get our first feat, and because we took this odd number stat split, we're going to take an ability improvement, getting up to 18 dexterity and 16 wisdom. This means that not only do we have good casting, we will be able to have reasonable DCs. In fact, our save DCs will be almost as high as any other character's save DCs would be at this point in the game. We'll only be one short of a full casting class's save DCs at level 4, and that's assuming that they rushed for the ability save improvement. And we will have 18 dexterity, meaning we'll have a +7 bonus to initiative, a truly ridiculous number, as well as really good AC and to hit chance and damage. Remember that +4 to hit is actually +6 to hit because we have the archery fighting style, so we'll very rarely miss our attacks, and they will do very good damage when we do hit with them. We continue to level in Ranger because now we get the most important ability for a martial character, Extra Attack. Now you go from 2 attacks in your opening round of combat to 3 attacks in your opening round of combat, one of which has the extra d8 of bonus damage. Obviously, this is extremely strong and will aid in your attempt to just one-shot enemies off the start of combat. You also, because you're a Gloomstalker Ranger, get access to Misty Step, the best mobility tool in the game. As a bonus action, letting you reposition up to 60 feet means that you will no longer have to fear melee enemies at all. This can also get you to places where enemies can't reach you, so certain melee enemies will simply not be able to interact with you if you Misty Step up onto high ground. And it gives you escape and mobility options. You can also chase down fleeing enemies, traverse certain arenas much quicker. Extremely powerful spell that it's great to have access to. For our second spell, we have a couple choices here. You could go back and retake whichever level of the 4 level 1 spells I mentioned that you don't have currently. I also think that Spike Growth is really excellent. It does take your concentration, but it is a 20-foot radius field that is difficult terrain, having enemy movement. One cool thing that you can do later on, I guess I'll show you this later on, but this allows you to block off enemy movement. Enemy melee characters will not be able to reach you. Enemy ranged characters will have a harder time fleeing from you, and it also does a little bit of damage if they happen to try to do so. Ranger level 6, we get to take another favored enemy, and as I mentioned, these are very minor bonuses, so I'm just going to take Mage Breaker because it gives us True Strike, and that will annoy the comment section. And then here we're going to take another Natural Explorer, Damage Resistance, giving us resistance to a second type of damage. Obviously this is really strong. Having resistance to multiple damage types means that we will be much more survivable than many other characters, especially against AoE effects. We also will have excellent dexterity and dex save proficiency, so enemies that are launching fireballs and stuff at us, well, we have resistance and we will usually pass the save against those, so they will be hitting us for very minimal damage. Poison, I believe, comes up slightly more often than cold in this game, although I think at this point you should be just about going into Act 2, where cold damage is more common. I'm actually not certain which of the two is going to be more common at this point, but I think if you take cold, it will have slightly more value for you in Act 2. Both of these are fairly equivalent, and I'm honestly not certain which one comes up more often. I'm sure somebody has done the math on that and will let me know in the comment section down below. Ranger level 7, we get one of the major advantages of staying in Gloomstalker for this long. We could otherwise have left at level 3 or level 5 for another class. Excuse me. But that is the incredibly powerful Iron Mind feat. This is one of the very few ways in the game to gain proficiency in extra saving throws, and this gives us proficiency in another good saving throw, in Wisdom, as well as Intelligence. If we took Deep Gnome as our race, then we would have advantage as well on these saves, meaning we would almost never fail a Wisdom saving throw, which is things like Stun and Fear and so on that come up quite frequently in this game. Because we would then be proficient and have advantage on them. But regardless, having proficiency in 4 different saves means we will be much, much less likely to experience the full effects of anything that's being cast on us, and we actually have decent constitution in the last important saving throw that we don't have maxed out, or don't have proficiency in. So this character gets way better saves than just about every other character. For our spell selection here, at this point it's a little less important what we pick. Enhanced Leap can be interesting, although we do have pretty low strength, so we won't be getting massive jump distances the way some other characters will. Silence does come up sometimes, although I wouldn't spend too much effort on that. Honestly, probably I'd just go back and pick Ensnaring Strike again, but at this point you will probably have a better idea of what you want in a spell. Then, of course, we're already level 7, so we go to level 8, and we get the very fun class feature, Landstride, making us immune to difficult terrain. This includes the slow and damage from spike growth. So now you can place spike growth underneath yourself. You can surround yourself in it, and enemies will have a very hard time reaching you in order to do damage. Some enemies will be able to jump the 20 feet distance to reach you, but many will not. Some enemies can't jump at all, and if you are, for example, in a narrow corridor and can make them traverse the full 40-foot distance of the spike growth, then they will be unlikely to be able to clear it in a single jump. This can buy you an extra turn of shooting them, as well as making them take a bunch of damage as they wade slowly across it, and you'll be immune to the effects. For our feat here, rather than taking a second ability improvement, we are going to take the Sharpshooter feat. You could, if you didn't take the odd stat split that I recommended at the beginning, instead of this, have considered taking Sharpshooter at level 4. The reason for this is that you have the archery fighting style, meaning that you are basically only taking a -3 penalty rather than a -5, compared to other characters that might be taking this, and you're very likely to be attacking with advantage on most of your attacks, so you can mitigate the hit penalty of Sharpshooter with both of those things and do much higher damage earlier at the trade-off of not getting to have high wisdom because you'll have to take a different stat split. Just something that I wanted to mention, but for this build, we will take Sharpshooter at level 8. At this point, we do have a decision. We could continue down the path of taking levels of Ranger to get access to 3rd level spells, as well as some of the cool class features that Gloomstalker Rangers in particular get later down the line. We could also branch out into another class, and if you are looking to branch out into another class, the one that I would recommend is Battlemaster Fighter for the maneuvers, as well as Action Surge, the best option, the single best class feature in the game, giving you basically a whole extra turn once per short rest. For this build, though, I'm going to recommend that you actually continue all the way down to Ranger level 12. And the reason is that Gloomstalker Ranger actually keeps getting cool stuff all the way to level 12. A lot of martial characters don't, and the other Ranger classes in particular, I think, don't really get as good of stuff as they continue to level, but Gloomstalker subclass has some really cool stuff as you continue to go. For our spell selection for level 3, this also gets us level 3 spells, and this will let us take sort of the big brother of Spike Growth, Plant Growth, which quarters enemy movement speed instead of having it. For all the reasons that this is good, and because you are immune to the slowing effects of this yourself because of Landstride, this also, unlike Spike Growth, isn't concentration. So you can cast this and still be concentrating on something else. Although this character doesn't have a lot of incredible uses for its concentration, you'll usually be using it on either Fog Cloud or Hunter's Mark. But Plant Growth is very good. You can also pick up at this point, if you want, Lightning Arrow. But typically I think Lightning Arrow is going to be worse damage than just making weapon attacks. It takes your whole action and it's going to do 6d8 of lightning damage, but you're generally speaking better off just making 3 weapon attacks in your opening round of combat, or in 2 weapon attacks in subsequent rounds of combat. Conjure Barrage has some uses, but generally speaking, I think is also just worse damage than using your actual weapon attacks. One other thing that's kind of fun and worth mentioning is Protection from Energy, because we already have resistance to 3 of these damage types, so this will let us get resistance to yet another one, and make sure that we just have resistance to like all the elemental damage types. Especially good if you're going for a more thematic ranger build, who's kind of an outdoorsman. You can gain protection from energy and have resistance to all of the elemental damage types. But I'm going to recommend just picking something and not replacing a spell at this level. Level 10, we get another favored enemy, so here we can take, for example, we can probably take Ranger Knight. You'll still be in medium armor, but there are a couple late-game heavy armors that are worth considering over medium armor. Maybe you want some of the effects of them more than you want the extra AC that medium armor will be worth to you. So I would probably take that. It's the only one that has a real benefit. But again, these are very minor benefits at this point. We get our last damage resistance from Natural Explorer, which is great. And at Ranger level 11, we get the reason that we stayed in Ranger for this long, Stalker's Flurry. What this means is that every time you miss on an attack, you just get to attack again for free. Effectively, this gives you advantage on every attack, although it also works with normal advantage, which we will have on just about every attack, meaning that you will almost never miss. This actually, I think, if you really, really want to never miss, is another good argument for going Halfling, which I mentioned right at the beginning, but I think overall you're going to be better off with Wood Elf or Deep Gnome. But basically you have double advantage on every single attack. Super powerful, means that you are an extremely consistent damage dealer, and one of the best things that Rangers get to be is just very consistent. You get to do the same thing every single turn very well. It also combines extremely well with Sharpshooter, because we have a to-hit penalty from Sharpshooter, with which Stalker's Flurry mitigates entirely, in addition to the advantage, meaning that you are effectively making just normal attacks with advantage and archery fighting style, guaranteeing that you hit very frequently for the additional 10 damage from your Sharpshooter shots. Spell selection at this point is not, I think, terribly important. You'll maybe take Protection from Energy, you could take Lightning Arrow just to have access to an elemental damage type. Overall, I think that these, if you really want healing and are finding that you need access to it, Cure Wounds can be good. If this were tabletop, I would recommend Goodberry, but healing potions are so plentiful and just better than good berries in this game that you can just use healing potions instead. And so we'll just take Protection from Energy and thematically have resistance to every damage type. Finally, at Ranger level 12, we get access to our final feat, going up to Dexterity 20, meaning that we are doing massive damage, have great AC, we have +8 to our initiatives. Every single attack that we make, we have +15 damage to, plus whatever the enhancement bonus of our weapon is. I'm also going to take a moment to talk about equipment here, because one thing that's really fun about Rangers is, I guess sort of... Oops, I need to actually finish leveling up. One thing that's fun about Rangers is that they actually wear a lot of equipment better than many other characters, because much like The Witcher, which is in many ways based on a D&D Ranger, I think, you will end up with very good uses for potions and elixirs, especially in this game. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those that are really good. A couple other items that are worth mentioning: any piece of armor that lets you add your full dex modifier to AC is very valuable. Let's say this Yuan-Ti Scale Mail, which is 15, just a normal 15 base medium armor, gives you 20 AC without a shield and 22 AC with a shield. Something that's worth mentioning is that in Baldur's Gate 3, you can benefit from the AC bonus of a shield while having a ranged weapon equipped, which somewhat differs from how it works in tabletop. And so you basically get 2 more AC than the equivalent tabletop character would have, meaning that at this level we have better armor class than a heavy armor and shield user would, since we get 15 plus 5 from our dexterity plus the 2 from our shield. And that's without any magical effects enhancing our armor class. We can continue to increase that. So between that, your excellent saves, your decent, although not spectacular, but pretty solid HP pool, and your resistances to many damage types, this is actually one of the most resilient characters that you can build. Some other items worth mentioning are anything that increases your damage, like these Gloves of Archery, of course, are custom made for you. And you use certain elixirs better than pretty much every other character, most notably the Elixir of Bloodlust. This gives you an extra action every time you kill an enemy, and you will basically kill an enemy on every action you take, because you don't typically have to move to chain your kills from one enemy to another. Unlike a melee character, you'll be able to attack pretty much everything across the battlefield at once, on a single turn. Since you're ranged, you just move to the middle of the battlefield and then launch all your attacks, and the Elixir of Bloodlust will let you chain kills between various enemies, guaranteeing that you can take out a large number of the enemy groups at a time. Similarly, the Potion of Speed or Haste from an ally are both incredibly strong for you because your actions are so strong, and you don't have a way to get more actions or additional attacks. On this build, anything that gives you those from Potions of Speed and Elixirs of Bloodlust are very valuable. A special arrow that I wanted to mention is the Arrow of Arcane Interference. I talked a little bit more about this in my Arcane Archer build, but the special arrows are extremely worth using for archers. There's a lot of cool combinations you can do with them, and if you want more info on that, watch my build on Arcane Archers. But this one's really worth mentioning because it silences an enemy and breaks their concentration, and this effect has no saving throw. It's based on just hitting them with the arrow, so you can guarantee breaking enemy concentration and applying silence to them, which is very powerful, of course, just by hitting them with this. Another cool specific damage combo that I wanted to mention is the Titan String Bow, which lets you add additional damage equal to your strength modifier, as well as the strength elixirs, the Hill Giant Strength or later on Cloud Giant Strength elixirs, would let you do an additional 5 damage on every attack or later 8 damage on every attack. In addition to your Sharpshooter bonus 10 damage, this will mean every attack hits for a massive boost of damage. So just worth mentioning that that specific combo is good, although I think typically you're going to want to just use a different bow and use an Elixir of Bloodlust instead of the Strength elixirs. You will also get access to Strength Gauntlets in the end game that you can use instead of that. Meaning that the Titan String Bow can come back in vogue when you get the Strength Gauntlets later on. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at my pick for the best Ranger. This is a fun build because it actually used 12 levels of Ranger, which honestly I didn't expect to do when I sat down to make this guide. I was expecting to deviate out and multi-class, but this build is so powerful when you just take 12 levels of Ranger. Good for soloing, good in a party, great for archery damage, and great all around. Alright, my friends, thanks so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a comment, hit that like button. Both of those things help a ton with the algorithm, and you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game content. I also have some other cool Baldur's Gate stuff coming up, so if you're just here for Baldur's Gate, I will be doing things in addition to just the build guides. More news on that shortly. Cheers, my friends, and I'll catch you next time.